The snow was falling harder now, turning the city streets into a quiet winter painting. Natalie Foster pulled her white nursing uniform tighter against the cold as she hurried down the sidewalk. She was already running late for her clinical shift at Memorial Hospital, and being late on her second week was not an option. At 28, Natalie had worked years to get into nursing school. She had been a waitress, a store clerk, anything to save money for tuition. This clinical rotation was everything. One mistake, one absence, and she could lose her spot in the program. Her supervisor had made that very clear. She checked her phone as she walked. 15 minutes until her shift started. If she ran, she might just make it. That is when she saw him, an elderly man, maybe 70 years old, sitting against the brick wall of a closed shop. His gray hair was dusted with snow, and there was blood on his face. A cut above his eye, still bleeding. He held his hand to his head, his face twisted in pain. Natalie stopped walking. People hurried past him, heads down against the snow, pretending not to see. In a city this big, it was easy to look away, easy to tell yourself someone else would help. She looked at her phone again. 12 minutes now. The man looked up and their eyes met. His were clouded with age but filled with confusion and fear. He tried to speak, but his words came out slurred. Natalie's nursing training kicked in immediately. That slur, that confusion, those could be signs of something serious. A stroke, a head injury, something that needed immediate attention. But her shift, her clinical rotation, everything she had worked for. She stood frozen for a moment, caught between two impossible choices. Then she thought about why she wanted to become a nurse in the first place. It was not for the money or the career. It was because her grandmother had fallen ill when Natalie was 16, and the nurses who cared for her treated her with such dignity and kindness. They made her last days bearable. Natalie had promised herself then that she would be that person for someone else someday. She knelt down beside the man, setting her bag on the snowy ground. "Sir, my name is Natalie. I'm a nursing student. Can you tell me your name?" The man tried to focus on her face. "Thomas," he managed. "I fell, hit my head." Natalie gently moved his hand away from the wound. The cut was deep, still bleeding. She pulled her scarf from around her neck and pressed it gently against the wound. "Thomas, I need you to stay with me, okay? Keep your eyes open. Can you tell me what day it is?" He struggled to answer. "Tuesday?" "No, Wednesday." "It's Thursday," Natalie said gently. She pulled out her phone with her free hand and called for an ambulance, then called the hospital to tell them she would not make her shift. Her supervisor's voice was ice cold on the other end. "This is your second week, Miss Foster. We have standards. If you're not here in 10 minutes, don't bother coming back." Natalie looked at Thomas, at his scared, confused eyes, at the blood seeping through her scarf. "I understand," she said quietly, "but there's a man here who needs help, and I can't leave him." She hung up before she could hear the response. Her hands were shaking, but not from the cold. The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later. As the paramedics took over, one of them looked at Natalie. "You did good. That pressure you applied probably saved him from losing a lot more blood. You in nursing school?" Natalie said, watching them load Thomas into the ambulance. She stood on the snowy street for a long time after they left, realizing what she had just done. She had thrown away her spot in the program. All those years of saving money. All those dreams. But when she closed her eyes, she did not see her ruined career. She saw Thomas's face, and she knew she had made the right choice. The next morning, Natalie sat in her small apartment staring at her laptop. She was looking at other nursing programs. Farther away, more expensive, programs that would take another year. Her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, is this Natalie Foster?" A man's voice, professional but warm. Yes, this is Nathan Cross. I'm the CEO of Memorial Hospital. I'd like to meet with you this morning, if you're available. Natalie's stomach dropped. The CO. They were probably going to make her dismissal official. Maybe ban her from reapplying. Of course, she said quietly. An hour later, Natalie sat in an office on the top floor of Memorial Hospital. The view overlooked the entire city. Nathan Cross sat across from her, a man in his late 30s with dark hair and intelligent eyes. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, but his expression was kind. Do you know who Thomas Henderson is? Nathan asked. Natalie shook her head. He's my father, Nathan said. He has early-stage Alzheimer's. He wandered away from his care facility yesterday morning. We had been searching for him for hours when you found him. Natalie's hand went to her mouth. Nathan leaned forward. The paramedics said you stayed with him, even though you were late for your clinical shift. They said you called your supervisor and chose to help my father instead. I couldn't just leave him, Natalie said simply. No, Nathan agreed. You couldn't, because you're exactly the kind of nurse we need. He slid a folder across the desk. I spoke with your clinical supervisor this morning. She was not pleased with me, but I can be persuasive when necessary. Your spot in the program has been reinstated. Natalie stared at him. What? You're back in the program. In fact, I'm personally overseeing your clinical education from now on. I want you on the cardiac unit when you graduate. We need people who understand that being a good nurse isn't about following rules blindly. It's about seeing a human being who needs help and choosing to help them, even when it costs you something. Natalie felt tears streaming down her face. I don't know what to say. Say you'll finish your training and come work for us. Yes, Natalie whispered. Yes, of course. Nathan smiled. My father wants to meet you. By the way, he's doing fine, thanks to you. The doctor said if he'd been out there much longer in that cold with that head wound, things could have been very different. As Natalie left the office that day, she thought about choices, about the moments that define who we are, about how the right thing and the easy thing are rarely the same thing. She thought about all the people who had walked past Thomas that morning, people with places to be, people with their own problems, people who had trained themselves not to see, but seeing people, really seeing them. That is what separates those who care from those who just go through the motions. 6 months later, Natalie would graduate at the top of her class. 2 years later, she would be running the cardiac unit at Memorial. 5 years later, she would develop a program to train nurses in compassionate care, teaching them that the most important skill is not technical knowledge, but the ability to see another human being and choose to help. And every year on the anniversary of that snowy morning, she would have lunch with Thomas and Nathan, 3 people whose lives intersected because one person chose to stop walking. Because sometimes the most important thing you can do is show up for someone, even when showing up costs you everything you think you want. And sometimes what looks like sacrifice is really just finding out what you're made of.